what it was like. So, go ahead.
I'm Don. I'm the youngest of the family, and I was born on August 12th, 1922. I'm now 83 years old and have fond memories of my life and growing up in the Steinberg family on Franklin Avenue. We moved to Franklin Avenue when I was 6 months old from the shtetl area of Toledo, where all the poor Jewish families lived. And my mother and father had raised all of us. My mother had actually 12 children, one stillborn, and my sister Evelyn was a twin who died in the flu epidemic after the First World War. My first memories of being in the family is I was very fat, and I used to sleep under the sink when I was a little boy. And my mother was very partial to me, almost all my life. And the problem with being in a large family we had is that before I got to know my older brothers and sisters, they were all already adult people. So my relationship as a family, when you have young people growing up at the same time, they can relate to them, but I could never relate to the older ones because they were either had left the house, Abe was in medical school, whatever it was, and I was just a little kid. Ray and I had a very, very close relationship all of our lives, our early lives, until I went off to college. And he couldn't quite understand. My brother Mort had made excellent students of both of us. My brother Mort had worked on my Uncle Joe's scrap yard for $1 a day, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And he was almost relegated to a kind of serfdom or slavery even. And he was convinced that his brother Don and Ray were not going to be experienced like that. So he brought home an old desk from the scrapyard covered with dirt and tar, and we spent the whole summer cleaning it up. And we put this desk up in the boys' room in our house in Franklin Avenue, and Mort would make us study. I studied harder in high school than I ever did in college. He insisted we study 5-6 days a week. 10 o'clock he would come home from his grousing around, and then we'd go out and have ice cream or go to bed. But our boys' room had 3 large double beds in it, and there were 5 boys, so a lot of us had to sleep 2 to a bed. The girls' room had 2 large beds for the girls, and my mother had her own room, my father had her own room. When I was born, they decided my mother and father shouldn't have any more kids. So they put me in my mother's bed, and I slept with my mother till I was about 5 or 6 years old. And interesting enough, that my father probably always looked sideways at me. But it prevented him from having any more children. Our grade school years at Fulton School were very interesting. A large percentage of the kids at Fulton School were Jewish, and the academic level they were extremely high. I think back on my 8th grade kids in our class, I think more than half of them were Phi Beta Kappas. They were extremely intelligent, and all of them went off and had very fine careers, and there were very few tragedies coming out of that era of the Depression. My football experiences were that my brother Mort had taught me contact football, and I loved contact football. Blocking and tackling was my thing. So even though in my senior year in high school we had an awful football team, in the junior year we had a great football team, and at that time Toledo football was among the best football in the state of Ohio. And we were playing Wait for the annual Thanksgiving Day. And that's very interesting. Every Thanksgiving Day was the most important holiday in our Steinberg family. We would go to the football game in the morning and come home and have a banquet, the big turkey and everything. And my mother did this every single year. My brother Mort had played football for Scott and also for TU. And actually he was on the first Arizona State football team. When it was organized, there was a fellow named Dixie Howell from Alabama who was an All-American who was made coach of the team. So Greg Rappaport from across the street, my brother Mort, were really tramp athletes. They had traveled from Toledo, to Bowling Green, to University of Toledo, University of Bowling Green, out to Tempe, Arizona, where they would get credits for going to school. So after Mort came out of the Army, he decided he was going to be a dentist. So he went to see the head of the hospital at Loyola University in Chicago, and he told Mort if he could pass physics and what was the other subject, algebra, they would let him in dental school. He passed him in the summertime, and actually speaking, my brother Mort couldn't spell cat. He really had no academic background whatsoever because he always wanted to be a football coach. He went to Chicago and roomed with a Chinaman who made Mutt into a student. And by the time Mutt graduated, he was really a top dental student. He came home and he had 2 offices. Since he had spent his life with the poor, he had 2 practices. One for the poor and his friends, and then another one for the poor. And interesting enough, Mort's contact with poor people was so dedicated and so intense. He could say anything he wanted to them. He could swear at them. He could call them any kind of name, and they loved Mutt. And Mutt spent his life in Toledo being a dentist, also getting involved in politics in Toledo, and a couple of the judges got into office because of Mutt. Mutt used to say, these guys are so dumb they don't understand anything, but he was their campaign manager. Finally, they had made Mutt the jail dentist if he would get out of politics, and Mutt spent the rest of his life doing that. But even the prisoners in the jail loved Mutt, every one of them. He had a personality that is so hard to describe because he would swear and holler and scream at everybody. Even in grade school, my sister Effie and my sister Belle refused to go to school. He would come into the classroom and start yelling at them or swearing at them. In the grade school and high school, they wouldn't go to school because they were so afraid of Mutt coming into the room. And that was the kind of guy he was. My brother Ray went on to become a very fine surgeon from TU. TU had a reputation of turning out great pre-med students because they had most of their medical courses at TU before they went to medical school. They had bacteriology and physiology and all these subjects at TU before they went to medical school, and these guys just shined whatever medical school went to. Most of the medical school students went to Wayne State. Cousin Harold and my cousin Al Shapiro, he's another part of the family you probably don't know about. But there was some kind of intermarriage in there that they were all related but not closely related. But they were very friendly. They would come around, and I remember Al Shapiro would come around. He would see me. He would swing me around the room with my head around a circle. It was amazing how he would do that, and I remember it very, very clearly. My sister Evelyn was a marvelous student, but because only the boys went to college, the girls went to work afterwards. And most families, mothers and fathers, saved their money to send their boys to medical school. My mother had my brother Ted and my sister Ann borrow money during the Depression to pay for Abe's education at George Washington University. And that's the way Abe went to medical school. And every year they would pay off the debt and reborrow it for the next year. So you don't see this very often in families with brothers and sisters who are 21, 22, or 23 years old sending their brother to medical school. But actually that's how we got started in success. And Ray and I went to medical school because the war had started, and we were in the ASTP program, but Abe had started to pay for Ray's.
Well, thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
And what do you remember about Uncle Don as a child?
My mother adored him. He was always a cute boy.
Obviously very bright, a very good athlete as well.